Welcome to the Growth Boss podcast, where we seek out the secrets to high-performing campaigns from some of the smartest marketers in the world. I'm your host, Gerrid Smith. Today, I have Holly Crawshaw with me, and she's going to teach us how to stand out on LinkedIn, even in the most saturated of industries. Holly is a best-selling writer and editor and has been part of the publishing industry since 2006. She's worked on over 1,000 books and has helped more than 30 clients grow their presence and influence on LinkedIn. Holly has written for big publishers focusing on business, personal growth, faith, and memoirs. She loves helping people tell their stories in a clear, powerful, and inspiring way. Holly, thanks so much for being here today.
Wow, I feel like now that was quite an introduction. Thank you so much, Gerrid. I'm so excited to be here.
Awesome. Likewise. So, Holly, how do people stand out on LinkedIn? I would love to hear, maybe if you could just take us from the beginning. If I was a new client working with you, how would you help me stand out?
I think one mistake that I see a lot of people make, Gerrid, is they try to do what everybody else is doing. More specifically, they try to do what the bigger creators are doing. And there's nothing wrong with being inspired or, taking notes from what other people are doing. But the very first step, if Gerrid, let's say I were working with you and you were like, Holly, will you set up my LinkedIn for me? Will you help me with my content, with all my, my funnels and my lead magnets? The very first place I would start is getting to know Gerrid and getting to know more specifically what makes Gerrid different from everybody else in Gerrid's industry. And I call that your 5% differentiators. Everybody's just a little bit different, right, than the next person in their industry. And I think instead of embracing that, a lot of people avoid that. They want to sound like other people. They want to sound like the thought leaders in their industry. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it just becomes a lot of white noise over time. Yeah. And what you really see happening on LinkedIn right now is that the people who are embracing their 5% differentiators, they are the ones sort of rising to the top because they sound different. They sound authentic. And that word I know is so overused, and I wish there were a better word for it, Gerrid. Yeah. But there's not. So, for example, when we were talking before we started recording, you mentioned that you work with your parents, that you guys started a business together. And that makes you different from everybody else in digital marketing, right? In that space. And so I would say, okay, Gerrid, that needs to be a thread that we pull through everything else. Even if it's in profile assets, even if it's in the color of, banner. When I say banner, if anybody's listening and they're not sure, that's that big, long picture at the top of a profile, right? Choosing your brand colors should be infused by your entire profile, your content, how you talk to people, how you interact with people should be infused with your 5% differentiators.
So I want to dig into that a little bit. I think a lot of people have a hard time figuring out what their differentiators are. I think if you were to ask me, Gerrid, what are your differentiators? I don't think the family thing would have been top of mind for me. So maybe we could start by you just sharing what some of the other differentiators were that you've seen with some of your clients so that we can kind of process through that.
Sure. Okay. So I have a list of 5 and I distilled this list. When I first came to LinkedIn in 2021, I was literally so bad at it. And as a professional writer, my ego was was bigger than my logic because I kept doing the same thing for 2 years. I kept trying to lead with what I thought people wanted to hear from me, with what all the other ghostwriters or LinkedIn experts in my space were doing and saying. So for the first 2 years, I was awful on LinkedIn. I mean, I maybe got 5 or 6 leads in 2 years. And so I went back to the drawing board. And that's really where this idea of embracing your 5% differentiators came from, is that I went and looked at what all the big creators had done over scale, not what they were doing currently, because that's a mistake, because what they're doing now is not what they did to start. And so I distilled all of their content. I did hours and hours and hours and hours of research. I truly did this. And I distilled their sort of content buckets, their approach to LinkedIn, their approach to content, their approach to their profile. I distilled it into sort of 5 categories of how they set themselves apart from everybody else in their industry. So I actually have a list for us
All
today.
right, let's hear it. Yeah.
Okay, so the first on the list is they embraced their unique skill or service. And so when I say that, I'm a ghostwriter, but I'm not just any ghostwriter. I'm a ghostwriter with this number of years of experience, with this work history, with these past clients. They spoke specifically about their unique skills or service in a way that set them apart from everybody else. For example, I could just say I'm a ghostwriter, but that's not specific enough. I'm a ghostwriter who works in these 3 fields. I've worked with these, few people, and I've had these work experiences.
Yeah.
And so the very first place I would start is talking about your unique skill or service. That's unique to Gerrid. That's unique to Holly. I'm not just a digital marketing expert. I'm not just a ghostwriter. It's more personalized than that. So that's 1.
I love that.
All right. 2, current or previous professions. So a lot of people don't talk about their previous professions. And I think that's probably because they think it's negligible, right? It doesn't matter. But if you think back on your work history, it truly has brought you to where you are now. And talking about your past experiences, even if they were bad, even if they were major failures, especially if they were major failures, Gerrid, those stories, they set you apart from everybody else because people get to know your story. And I know people talk often and on LinkedIn especially about sharing your story. But this list of 5 differentiators, this really is how to share your story. These are the 5 filters that you can share your story through, where you're not just saying, well, I don't know, I woke up today, I went for a run, I had some coffee, then I had some meetings. That's my story.
Yeah.
People have a hard time sort of drilling down on how to share their story. So 1, your unique skill or service. 2, embracing your past professions, your past mistakes, your past relationships even. So that's 2. 3 would be, this is the sales piece, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're going to be on LinkedIn and you want to monetize LinkedIn, you do at some point have to talk about your offers.
Sure.
That was really hard for me, but when I went back and looked at these big creators, they were very specific when they made their offer. They didn't sell often, right? They sowed a lot more value than they reaped in asking for sales. But learning how to share your specific offer, especially if you're a solopreneur, I'm sure you have a lot of solopreneurs who are listening, wrapping a language around that, right?
Yep.
Being specific about value, and obviously leading with value. You lead with value and you lead with story, and then you make the sell. And that's all within this 3rd sort of content bucket or 5% differentiator bucket, is learning how to talk about your sale, learning how to talk about what you offer people. That was so hard for me, Gerrid. That was so hard for me. And I think it's hard for a lot of people to write those posts, to say, hey, I'm a coach. I coach men in their mid-40s and I help them have healthier lives. But what's the value that you're bringing, right? Again, that's just a title. That doesn't really, even though it sounds niche down, it's not personalized because there's no story or vernacular or language wrapped around it that's really specific to you. All right, 4. These are personal stories. So, Gerrid, I don't know if you have noticed, but on Sundays, I share a post and it's called Story Sunday. Every single Sunday, I share a story. It's very personal. One time I came home from work and my girls were in the car with me and there was a snake in my front yard. And at the time, I wasn't married. I was single. I was like the woman of the house. And I tried to kill this snake, and I love snakes, and I know snakes are good, but my kids were having a heart attack, and I couldn't do it. And so it was just this big, long story. And I shared that post. And that was the start of Story Sunday because it gives people a look at our inner lives. People always
Absolutely.
think like, I have to attach it to something, sexy. I have to attach it to a great hook. I have to attach it to a business lesson. I have to attach it to something with a bigger meaning. But these stories that I share on Sundays, it really is, it sounds ridiculous, but it's sort of like story time, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
circle around. I'm going to tell you like a campfire like story, like
Right.
an entertaining story, but it gives people a glimpse into our lives.
That's right.
And again, to use the word authentic, it makes you incredibly human, which people are thirsting for. People are attracted to and drawn to, especially today when everything's AI and you're not sure if you're talking to a human or if you're talking to a robot.
Yeah. Yeah.
These types of stories have done. My Story Sunday post is always one of my best performing posts of the week. I mean, I've had lots of clients adopt that same model of picking a day of the week just to share a story about their lives, right?
Yeah.
And so that is, if I were to pick any of the 5% differentiators to lean into, I would say that's the one I would major on. And I think a lot of people are worried, Gerrid, about coming off like LinkedIn is Facebook. You've heard
Yeah.
that said before, right? This isn't Facebook.
Right.
Well, it's not. You deliver the story in a way that's appropriate for LinkedIn, right? In
Right.
terms of formatting and timing and things of that nature, but you're still just sharing a personal story. I
Yes.
share a story about my kids. My kids are in sports. I don't know if you can see them in
Yep.
that
Yep.
picture back
Yep.
there. But I have 3 daughters and they're all athletes. And so I share stories about them. And people will draw, here's the cool thing, people will infer and draw meaning from my stories that I didn't even see once I share them, right? They'll have a lesson. They'll have a takeaway that I didn't anticipate.
Sure.
So Story Sundays, super meaningful. And of course, in all of our content, if we're talking about content specific,
Yeah.
it's always important, in my opinion, to include a little bit of story, right? Some type of story that draws people in, that is interesting, fascinating, because it has the same effect as a personal
Absolutely.
story.
Yep.
But there's also a spot on LinkedIn for you to just talk about your life. Of course, if it is, I woke up and went for a run and nothing happened, that's not very interesting. So you are
Right.
looking for the stories
Yes.
that are a little bit more entertaining or a
Yeah.
little bit more adventurous or
Yeah.
meaningful. And people will draw meaning from your stories that
Right.
you didn't see were there in the first place.
100%.
So, and this is the last one. It's your LinkedIn journey. And a lot of people, look, Gerrid, more people push back on this than probably anything else that I suggest for them because no one wants to come off as if they think they perceive themselves as a LinkedIn expert. And so they shy away from sharing their LinkedIn journey. But here's the weird thing. If you think about it logically, if you think about content like a funnel, right? The very widest point of the funnel on LinkedIn is LinkedIn. Everybody on LinkedIn obviously cares about LinkedIn, wants to get better, wants to vent, wants to ask questions, right?
Yep.
And so I always encourage my clients to talk about their LinkedIn journey regularly. If you have a 5 post structure through your week, if it's a like 5 days a week post structure, I would work my clients through each of these buckets as 5% differentiating buckets. And that would be their content cycle. And that's exactly what I would tell you to do is to walk through these 5 buckets and especially the LinkedIn journey,
Yeah.
because that's the one people want to hear about. And it's not saying, hey, here's what I know about LinkedIn. I
Sure.
think I'm a LinkedIn. It's, hey, here's what I'm curious about, or here's what LinkedIn has done for me, or here's somebody I met on LinkedIn. There's 1,000 different ways to talk about your LinkedIn journey that would not position you as someone who perceives himself as being an expert.
Right.
And yet so many people push back on that because of that fear of people thinking that they think they're something that they're not.
Yeah. And here's the beautiful thing that was going through my mind as you were sharing that last point is like, I think worst case scenario with something like that, if I'm fearful of sharing my LinkedIn journey, I don't want to come across as being egotistical. It's like, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? The worst thing that's going to happen realistically is nobody sees the post and it's like, oh, okay, well, nobody saw it anyway. You know what I mean? It's kind of like the first 50 to 100 videos that you create short form content. I remember, Russell Brunson or somebody sharing like, it's only going to be your mom liking those videos. And so it really doesn't matter how bad they are. And that's totally been my journey as well. And I'm like, okay, cool. So there really isn't anything to lose. Is that kind of what you've noticed as well?
Here's what I've really noticed is that even if people see your post, they won't remember it tomorrow.
No, that's true.
So even if it's more than your mom,
yeah.
I don't remember what I had for lunch yesterday. I don't remember what I posted Monday of last week, and it's my content. And I think this is true in life, is that we are hyper aware of ourselves in a way that makes us think that everyone is thinking something about us, right? And the truth is that for the most part, we're all walking around worried about ourselves. People aren't thinking about us nearly as often as we think they are.
Yeah. As we're thinking about it. Yeah. Exactly. The other thing that really struck me, and one of the challenges that I've had in my LinkedIn journey, is sharing my story, right? And being okay with letting people inside only because I think I have this notion, and I'm sure a lot of entrepreneurs have this as well, where they're like, I just have to provide a lot of value. It's all about the value, right? Like, here's my best tips. Here's my best secrets. When people are looking to engage, people are looking to be inspired, people are looking at the humanity on LinkedIn. People don't open up LinkedIn because they're like, I need to learn the greatest SEO hacks of all time. It's more like, hey, I've got 15 minutes to kill and I'm a business professional and I'm probably more curious about what's going on in my business world than maybe my personal friend world, but it's more interest in that personal side of things than it is in the facts and the value that we could provide as creators. Would you say that that's mostly true, or what's been your experience?
Yeah, so I actually have an interesting story that I think wraps around that entire idea. So I worked with a billion-dollar founder on a book, and it was a masterpiece. And not because of me, it was because his story, his personal story, his journey, it was so incredibly powerful and inspiring, where he had come from, what he had done. Had exited twice. He never had to work again. He was brilliant. And if I could share, everybody would know who I'm talking about, or at least share what he did, his business. And we worked on this book for about a year, and it came time to hit publish, and he backed out. And I was so disappointed. It broke my heart because he was so fearful of sharing that personal side, like you mentioned, that story, so fearful. And he thought, no one cares, right? And that's sort of what you were alluding to, like, no one cares. But the truth is that I learned so much about life and business writing that book, that the world is a tiny bit dimmer because that book will never see the light of day.
Yeah.
And he and I are still great friends. And we talk about it a lot. He wants to circle back to it all the time. But I think a couple of things. I think when you have reached some sort of success, there's a level of self-protection that exists, right? Or say you're a CEO or you're a leader or you're in charge of people. We have this sort of protective layer that does us some good, right? In business, right? You got to have it,
Absolutely,
right?
100%.
But when it comes to peeling back just a little bit, I always tell people, please don't bleed on LinkedIn. Like, do not bare your soul. We're not here for your dirty secrets.
Right.
We just want to get to know you.
Yeah.
So I'll give you an example from my own life, Gerrid, is that I was divorced in 2018. And so when I came to LinkedIn in 2021, obviously that was in my past. Not necessarily hid, I just never talked about it, never mentioned it. for 2 years. Those 2 years that I failed, right? And then I went back and I realized I got to share my personal stories.
Yeah.
You can share about some of those. That was the darkest moment in my life, but I found a way to share about it that was honoring to myself and to the situation. I always tell people, share the headline. Think about it in terms of a news article. Share the headline, not the news copy. You don't have to go into detail. You don't have to, as I said, bleed on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
But you can share headlines from your life and then move to another point, help the reader apply it to their lives, help the reader find some meaning in it. But that's sort of how I help clients share their story, especially when they're fearful, is we talk about it in terms of headlines. Okay, what's the one sentence summary? I was shocked by my divorce in 2018. That's all I said about it. And when I finally did share, you would not believe the outpouring, especially of single moms in my DMs wanting to work with me, wanting to talk to me, wanting to encourage me. I didn't know there were other single moms out there who were, owning their own business and who were raising children and who were juggling all. I had no idea. It empowers people to share their story back to you and to see themselves in a position. What stories really, one of the most powerful things that stories do, it brings people out of isolation.
100%.
And it helps people realize, okay, I'm not the only one. Yeah. Because when you suffer or when you're in pain or when you fail or when you're disappointed, it can often feel like you're the only one and that it's all your fault.
Yes.
Right? Yep. We go to shame as human beings pretty quickly.
Absolutely, we do.
And when we can share our stories, it helps people understand that they are part of a community, whether or not they know each other, they're not alone.
Yeah.
And they're not the only one who has experienced, that type of situation. And I would say the same is true about success. I think people are just as hesitant to share their successes.
Yeah.
As their failures. I think it feels like, I don't want to come across like I'm bragging. I don't want to come across a certain way. And again, I just go back to that. Okay, just share the headline, not the news copy. I exited for $1 billion. Here are 3 things I learned, right? And so that's how I would structure that type of story. You immediately go to what's helpful and practical after you share the headline.
I love that. Do you remember back to that post where you opened up, the headline was talking about your divorce? What were the helpful points that were in that original post?
Yep. So I've written that post. I'm a big believer in recycling posts. Okay. I'm a big believer in running analytics. When you very first start, I would say every 90 days, but I run mine about once a month and I see which posts did the best and I bank those posts. Okay. So I take maybe the top 3 and I put them in a post bank and I know, okay, this is a post that I need to repeat. Or something that I tell my clients is analyze the magic. Like, what do you think made this work? Was it the hook? Was it the call to action? Did you have somebody important repost it? Was it really great content? Was it a good story? Always analyze the magic of your posts or analyze the poison.
Yeah, for sure. That's how you learn too, right? Yeah.
So I've written that post many, many times, but when I very first shared it, what I shared was, here are the 3 things that I wouldn't have if that hadn't happened. And one of those things is my career.
Yeah.
I would have never had to have stepped out on my own. I didn't know what day the trash ran. I didn't know anything about running a household. I was the wife that handed over the check and just was like, hey, we're happy. Yeah. And what I learned from sharing that post is that people were not on the other side of it yet. See, I was on the other side of it, right?
Yes.
By that point. And I encountered so many people who were not on the other side of it yet. And to be able to tell them that the sun will come out again actually healed something in me, as well as healed something in them.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I love that. That's amazing. That's amazing. We're all just looking for connection. And that's kind of what is resonating in my heart, is just like, when you're letting those people in, that connection is formed. And again, you're sharing what you learned. Again, one of them was your career. It may not have been any mind-blowing advice, but by you letting people inside, like you said, you got a bunch of business out of that you weren't probably even anticipating when you're like, hey, I should publish this. It was just like, I should just let this out and kind of see what happens. And it happened to be a very powerful and important post for your business in addition to you personally.
I didn't know how to go on being authentic without sharing that.
Yeah.
And I think, people have wounds and trauma, and I am definitely not suggesting that people get on LinkedIn and share their wounds and trauma.
Sure.
I was far beyond the situation. I had a ton of healing and perspective, and I was at a point where I was ready to share.
Yeah.
And like I said, I didn't for 2 years, and because I wasn't ready.
Yeah.
And so there are things that you'll never share, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are things on LinkedIn that I'm never going to share about myself.
Yeah.
But I realized that part of my 5% differentiators was that I was a single mom,
Mm-hmm.
a single working mom. I identified that made me different from other ghostwriters in a lot of different ways. One of my fears, honestly, Gerrid, was that people wouldn't hire me because they would perceive me as unstable or as unreliable, right? Because when you hear the term single mom, there's a picture that comes to mind, right? And it's unfortunate. But what I found instead was that, and here's the key, sharing your story authentically attracts the right people to you.
That's right.
It brings you the people who are for you.
Yep.
And it will repel the people who are not for you. So stories act like a magnet, right? They're a magnet for who's for you, who's right for you, who's aligned with you, whose values are aligned with yours. And I believe in sharing my values on LinkedIn. I don't hammer them home that I'm a Christian. That's another one of my 5% differentiators, is that my faith is super important to me. In sharing that, again, I was nervous to share that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't talk about politics. I draw the line there.
I
draw the line at politics.
Yeah.
But sharing your values, another value that I have, and this is something I try to help my clients discover about themselves, are their unpopular opinions. And people are super afraid. Either people are super afraid to share their unpopular opinions, or they share an unpopular opinion as clickbait. They share it as a hook and then they back out. That is terrible. Do not do that.
Yeah.
But in discovering sort of, again, what makes me different from other ghostwriters is that I believe that it is a partnership in terms of, when we work together, I want to interview you. I actually want to use your words. I use transcripts. I want to use your words. I don't want to go into a corner and just type away and use chat, or AI to type a post. I want to sit down and interview you. That makes me different from most ghostwriters, right? Yep. And so discovering what that looks like in your business, what makes you different in a certain way, in a way that you deliver, right? Yes. That's incredibly important as well. So that's one of my unpopular opinions. Another one of my unpopular opinions, and you may get hate email for this, but I support the hustle lifestyle. I believe in seasons of hustle.
Yes.
I believe in
cyclical hustle as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I shared that post, and man, oh man.
Yeah.
It started some conversations.
Yeah.
But it also drew the right people to me.
That's right.
But kind of embracing those things that you're kind of like, anything that kind of makes you cringe to share, you might consider sharing it, because it's what makes you different.
Yep. I love it. And I think, again, we're not at the Gary V level where there could be massive backlash. You have 50,000 followers. I have 15,000 followers. It's like, what am I honestly afraid to lose by opening up, sharing my heart, and maybe getting a little backlash? But again, maybe I lose a couple thousand, but maybe I gain a couple thousand of people who actually do share the same values as me. And at the end of the day, that's way more important than just a number.
And I always think there's a way to tactfully say just about anything. I'm Southern, Gerrid.
Yep.
I'm from Atlanta.
Yep.
So we're all about tact. I was raised in a very conservative Southern house. And so I believe that there is a nice way to say just about anything. So in sharing your unpopular opinions. You don't have to be a jerk about it.
Yeah. 100%.
There's a way to say what you want to say without coming across. And there's people who will intentionally sort of their tone, their voice, what they've embraced as their brand is sort of in your face. And I get that might work for some people, but what I find is that one of the most underrated, and this goes against the grain, it's an unpopular opinion, one of the most underrated soft skills is just learning how to be nice, how to be kind and respectful in all of your interactions. That is a very underrated soft skill, in my opinion. And, to each their own, to the creators out there who are like, in your face, that's their brand and that's the voice that they've chosen. But what I find is that only attracts others like that, right? And so you're not going to attract people that you probably want to work with.
Yeah, I love it. So once I've identified kind of my core differentiators, I'm pulling my history forward, I want to open up, I'm ready to share. What are the next steps once I've got that dialed in?
So I'm a big believer in batch writing content. I schedule my content 7 posts at a time. I sit down every Sunday night from 4 to 6, 4 to 8. It used to be a lot longer, but now I have all my content banked, right? So I can just pull from my content bank at this point.
And I want to interrupt real quick and just say, listen, so many people think they're committing to this for the rest of their life, but just like this, you're building up this bank of content. And yes, it took you a couple of years, but now it's maybe a couple hour session once a week. And again, it's a little bit daunting when you first get started because you're like, gosh, this is going to take maybe a full day a week or a half a day a week. But over time, both you get better and you have your bank of content that you're working through.
It takes me about 2 hours to
love that.
write all my posts, create post attachments, and to schedule them. It takes me about 2 hours now.
Yeah.
But one thing that I've done, Gerrid, and this is a little note, is I have the Notes app on my phone. It runs my life.
Yeah, me too.
I have a list of LinkedIn ideas. And as I'm going through my week, as I'm going through my day, I'm always on the lookout for, that's a post idea. Yeah. That's a post idea. And once you start posting, you'll start thinking that way.
Yes.
But to create a system to sort of capture those ideas is my greatest recommendation. And my tech stack is very unsavvy. I am not technically inclined. I use the Notes app on my phone because it's on my phone, my laptop, my Mac, my iPad, it's everywhere. And so I just record my ideas. And people who don't like to type, they can do voice memos. I think that keeping track of post ideas, because people sit down and there's nothing worse than sitting down to a blank screen. I've sat down for 19 years to a blank screen, right? So I've had to create systems to capture ideas to at least get me started in the right direction. So I want to circle back because I didn't really answer your question, and I'm sorry. No. But what I would tell you to do next is, I'm assuming that your profile is set up, right, Gerrid?
Yes.
Okay, so your profile set up, you've got a professionally designed banner, you've got a professional headshot, you've got something in your featured section that allows people to connect with you somehow. It's a link that they can connect with you or learn more about you or take a next step with you. Those are the most important part of a profile, in my opinion. So to create a content calendar, a lot of people get super overwhelmed. Like, I've got to post about this and this and this and this and this, and I've got to make sure I have a post that represents each of these categories, because I hear all of these creators telling me I need content buckets. And I do recommend that you have 4 to 5 things that you talk about regularly. I also think when you get started, I always say that LinkedIn is like Target. You go into Target with a list and you come out with Target. You come out from Target because Target tells you what you want.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You don't tell Target what you want.
Right.
Target tells you what you want.
Yep.
And I always compare LinkedIn to Target because you have to test your audience. You can't just shoot out content into the world and hope that people care. You have to test out content. I call it the essential blend of the artist and the entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
The artist creates because they want to create, because they're inspired. They put their art out into the world and allow the world to judge it.
Mm-hmm.
Then the entrepreneur simply creates to sell.
Yeah.
There has to be an essential blend of the artist and the entrepreneur on LinkedIn.
Love that.
So you create, you pay attention to what people respond to, you bank it because you're doing your analytics, and then you figure out a way to repeat it, either the content or the magic of whatever made that content resonate with people.
Yeah. So are you the kind of person that says, listen, you need 5 buckets and maybe you're constantly rotating those buckets depending on what's hitting and what's not? Or would you recommend somebody like me sitting down and saying, why don't you start with like 15 buckets, work through the 15 and narrow it down to 5 once you've kind of identified which ones are resonating the most?
Well, if I were working with you, I would give you a content worksheet that sort of got you started.
Okay.
But if you're not working with a professional and you're out on your own, I would absolutely recommend that approach of saying, okay, here are 10, 15 things that I can talk about. I can talk about all of them in more than one way. So I'm going to just test the waters, see what resonates. I'm going to pay attention, and then I'm going to iterate whatever worked.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. And I think I can see a lot of entrepreneurs maybe struggling a little bit with the analytics component of it, because I'm thinking like, did any of my posts go viral the last month? No. But that doesn't mean that there weren't good ideas that are worth building off of again. So
sure.
Aside of like the raw data of like which post got the most likes or the most impressions or the most engagement, whatever, like what are some nuanced things that you're looking at as you study somebody's campaign?
So there are 2 indicators of how well a piece of content has performed. The first, inbox, your DMs, the connection requests. That's extremely nuanced.
Love that.
But sometimes people will not engage. There is a silent majority on LinkedIn who will never comment, never like, because that's public. But what they will do is DM you.
Yeah.
And so I pay attention to the DMs I get and the connection requests I get in response to content. And then the other piece, which is what LinkedIn prioritizes more than anything else algorithmically, if you're talking about algorithmic value, would be comments. Commenting. And I teach a lot of comment strategies and how to get more comments and create comment threads within your comment box. But my main piece of advice for anyone posting on LinkedIn is to learn to comment, to make it a discipline. I say at least 20 a day. I probably send 50 a day now. It used to be as many as 200 when I was trying to scale and grow. But that includes the responses to comments on my own post.
Sure.
So not only are you responding to the comments on your own post, but you're sending outbound comments to people who have never seen your profile before.
Totally.
And the reason you do that is like, that's an invitation to the party.
Yes.
That's an invitation to come check out what I'm doing.
Yep.
So if I were to, any piece of content that I measure, I don't look at impressions because impressions vacillate and impressions can be affected by a myriad of influences. What I look at are comments and my DMs and my connection requests.
I love that. Okay. Very good. What are some other things that the average business owner needs to understand as they're diving into LinkedIn and hopefully building out a successful LinkedIn brand?
Is that consistency matters more than anything else in the beginning. If you're talking about algorithmic value, the algorithm recognizes consistency at 2 posts a week. So if that's all you can do, that's where to start.
Okay.
If that's all you can do and comment, that's where to start, right? Some people are like, I can post 5 days a week, but I can only comment 1. My advice to them is to figure out a way to comment 2 days a week, choose the same day, choose the same time, twice a week, and make sure you put it on your calendar as if it were a meeting to be online engaging when that post goes live.
Okay. So I can understand how my voice would maybe be more relevant to responding to comments on my own posts, obviously. What are your thoughts on outsourcing the commenting process, almost like the outbound side, connecting with new people? Is that something that is okay to give to my assistant with certain instructions? Or is it like, no, that needs to be unique to your voice too?
So that's a great question. And my opinion on this has changed. I was very old school, like I do my own comments. But what I realized is that it's important for Holly to do her own comments because I'm on LinkedIn selling LinkedIn services,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
And so it would be incredibly inauthentic for me. It would feel inauthentic for me to hire, say, a VA, which I know a lot of people do.
Yep.
The only time that I think it's highly appropriate to hire out or delegate your comments would be exactly what you said, is giving it to an assistant. I have several clients that I ghostwrite for, and I work with their assistants to understand the author's voice and understand sort of their goals. And we work together to create lists of who they should be commenting on, because there's nothing more embarrassing, and I've had this happen, than having the VA comment on my post and then the actual person comment on my post because they didn't realize that the VA had already commented on my post. So I think that having someone in-house, having someone highly familiar with your processes, your voice, your opinions, your philosophies, all of those things are incredibly important. But I do think there are situations where there are business owners who cannot comment.
Yep.
They are in meetings doing what only they can do.
Yep.
Right. And so to delegate comments, I have had a couple of clients have good experiences with VAs, but it's because there was an incredible amount of coaching on the front end. It's not something that you should just, you'll get a DM that says, hey, I'll comment 50 comments a day for this amount of dollars. Those types of deals, they never work out well. Again, because of the inauthenticity of how it comes across.
Yeah, 100%. One of the last questions that I like to ask is, what do you feel like the top 1% of your clients, the most successful ones, have had in common?
That is a great question. The top 1% of my clients, what have they had in common? That is a really good question. I would say integrity. I would say the top 1% of everyone that I've worked with have been people with deep-seated integrity. I'm not talking about a faith system. I'm talking about a moral code. I'm talking about they do the right thing when no one's looking. And that becomes evident in all business relationships, right? Over time, if you lack integrity, it becomes extremely evident over time. But I've had the great joy, even the guy whose book will never see the light of day was a man of incredible integrity, someone extremely trustworthy, honest, direct, someone who wasn't afraid to admit fault or weakness and to really look themselves in the mirror. All of those things to me describe integrity.
Amazing. I love it. Holly, thank you so much for joining us today. For people that want to connect with you, I'm assuming that LinkedIn is going to be the best place to do that.
It is. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Appreciate your time.